All right, welcome back. So our next speaker is Peter Lowe, and he's one of the OGs when it comes to the world of ad blocking. He runs a very, very famous block list called Peter Lowe's block list. Peter has been running a block list since 1997 and has contributed to various ad blocking efforts since. He'll be talking about ad blocking, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So over to you, Peter. You might be muted, Peter.
Sorry. Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. And thanks for the introduction, Shwetank. You were very flattering. Okay, so let's get started. Here we go. Yeah, so welcome to my little talk, ad blocking, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But it's actually going to be the bad, the ugly, and the good, because I wanted to end on a positive note. As Shwetank just introduced me, I'm Peter Lowe. I created a block list that's been online since 1997. Covers trackers and ad servers mostly, but there's a few other nasty things in there as well. I've mostly worked as a developer in my career for the last 20 years or so. But for the last year, I've been working as a security researcher for DNS Filter. DNS Filter offers content blocking at the DNS level, which is one of the things that I've always thought about doing myself, but was too lazy to do. I'm not very good at slides, so please forgive me for the poor quality of these slides. And the usual caveats, this is not comprehensive. It's just my opinion. I'm going to miss things, but let me know what I've missed, and I can add it next time. So starting off with the bad side. Host files. Host files are one of the most popular ways of ad blocking, apart from browser extensions. But one of the reasons is that they're so easy to implement, and the concept, once you understand it, is really attractive. The idea that you can configure your computer so that it won't even try and look up a domain that's used for ad serving is very interesting. And once it clicks in people's heads, it's people kind of adopt the idea and start adding all sorts of ad domains. That's how I got started, but I very quickly moved. Sorry. Oh, I didn't realize the mouse wheel did that. As you can see, not an experienced presenter, I'm afraid, but here we go. Yeah, so the bad thing about host files is that there's no wildcards. That's basically it. If you want to block add.uk.doubleclick.net and add2.uk.doubleclick.net, you have to have a separate entry for each one. This makes it very hard to maintain, and as a result, you get a lot of false positives. People end up with host files which are hundreds of thousands of entries long, and finding out when one of those is now serving legitimate content is almost impossible. So you end up using a tool, and unfortunately, the tools themselves aren't great. My list, I checked last Sunday, and at about 1 o'clock, which is Sunday's a quiet day, and my list had already had 160,000 downloads from one of those tools in particular. They're very hard to track as well. The tools can give you some options to maintain the list, but if you go ahead and add a host file that you've come across, you have no way of knowing whether that host file has been deprecated or not without going to the site and checking it for yourself. So it's very difficult to make sure that you're including up-to-date information in your host file. But they're better than nothing, and they are a great introduction to the whole idea of blocking that way. And yeah, I know my website talks about host files, but yes, I'm pretty lazy, unfortunately, and I still need to update the site. But I do find it is a good way to kind of explain to people how that side of things works. Another bad thing is unblockable stuff. One of those is server-to-server tracking, which essentially we have no control over. When you go to a website and you view some pages and you click on different things, and then that website sends information about your browsing behavior behind the scenes to another server, there's just no way to block it. It's a shame, and there's no real solution that I know of apart from some sort of legal means, and that's almost impossible to discover whether people are doing this anyway. Another type of unblockable, well, mostly unblockable, is cloaked tracking. It's very difficult to block. An example is CNAMEs pointing to trackers and ad servers. But another case is where a host name will just point to the IP address of an ad server. And these can change all the time, and it's almost impossible to keep up with them, and people keep on adding new ones. A lot of hard work is done by other filter list authors and to keep up to date with it, but it's not possible to really kind of say, okay, I want to block this domain if something else is pointing to it. And the unknowable IDs. So when you visit a site and it assigns you an ID, and that ID is then used to track all your behavior across multiple different sites, it's pretty much impossible to figure out without a lot of hard work what that ID is being used for, where it's being used, and how it's affecting what you're seeing on the web. And that sucks. I mean, a good example is Google's court case where they got taken to court over the GDPR violations. And it was only after a lot of people did some research into how these IDs were being used that it was actually obvious what was going on. And there's nothing the end user can do, which is a real shame. And yeah, another bad thing is that there's just a general apathy about ad blocking. It is becoming more into the public consciousness, but a lot of people just don't care about it. And even when they do understand what's going on, they don't really understand how they're being profiled. So the issue is that people don't realize what this data is being used for, and they don't realize that information that they should have control over, they don't. A good example is my wife, who has consistently resisted my efforts to install ad blockers and things on her devices. I've been running my block list for 23 years, and I've been married for 8 years, and I have never had any success until the pandemic, when my wife's company set up an online shop. And then she went into work one day, and someone from her marketing department called her up and said, hey, so we're thinking of promoting this product and this product. And they were pointing out some stats that they had from the website. And my wife finally saw exactly what kind of information was being recorded and how people were looking at it and how they were adapting what they were doing, because they could see exactly what people were doing on the site. And she came home and said, okay, I get it now. And another example is my colleague's wife told me an anecdote about his, my colleague's colleague told me an anecdote about his wife, where she was browsing online and looking up some product. And then I think her internet went down, and she switched to her laptop, which was connected on Ethernet, and logged into Facebook and saw a whole ton of ads all about the product that she'd been looking at on her mobile on a different network. And it was scary because these things aren't connected. They shouldn't have any influence on each other, but they do. And it's, most people just don't get it. Okay, so the ugly side of ad blocking. One of the more ugly side is the fact that it's a constant fight. There's no easy way to say, just don't track me. There's been a lot of attempts at legislature about this that shows the intent of people who want to remain private and be untracked. But there's too many people with too much money who don't want that, unfortunately. And despite the fact that there's things like the GDPR and CCPA now, there's still companies who pay a lot of money to figure out ways and loopholes around that. There's also companies who watch GitHub commits and rotate their ad domains. So they watch to see which domains are being added to filter lists and then just change it on their website. And the funny thing about this is that you can see when they go home for the day, because they stop rotating the domains on the websites, which I think is hilarious. But it's people whose job is there to circumvent the ad blocking that's been put in place. It's people who want to be to stay private, but just can't. And there's also companies who threaten litigation. I was going to include some details here, but I thought it better not in case I get sued. But yeah, there's the people's reaction sometimes is quite bad. They feel like they have a right to serve ads and a right to track people. And when you put measures in place to stop that, they get very upset. And the threat of litigation isn't just a problem with regard to the lawsuit. It's a problem because it shows people's attitudes towards ads, and the choices of the end user is not respected at all. It's quite sad and kind of ugly, if you ask me. I think one of the biggest problems and one of the most ugly aspects of ad blocking at the moment is fake browser extensions. The most classic example is uBlock, where the original add-on uBlock, which started out as an add-on to block tracking and block ads. It's a wide spectrum content blocker, but that's the primary use for most people. It split long years ago, but the original one has now been sold and has added telemetry to the existing extension. And unfortunately, there's this existing user base which is going to be taken advantage of because they don't know the difference between uBlock and uBlock Origin. A really recent example, which actually had a big news story today, was Nano Adblocker. That's been sold, put it in quotes because it's a bit unclear about exactly what was passed on and what wasn't, at least to me. And it's now almost immediately tracking users and doing a lot of other pretty horrible stuff. I really need to update this slide because the thing that we've heard is that it's liking images on Instagram for accounts which aren't following anything and are nothing to do with people who have the Nano Adblocker installed. And if you've ever gone to the Firefox add-ons page, Chrome extensions, or the Android App Store and search for block ads or ad blocker, you will find hundreds or thousands of results. And most of those are fake or malware, essentially, or tracking you somehow. And it's almost impossible for an end user who doesn't really know what's what to know which ones are legit. There's a few which most people are familiar with who have had some experience with it, but picking those out is actually very difficult. You can see from the screenshot here that they're all got the same kind of similar red shield type logo. They've got an ad block in the name, that kind of thing. To figure out the fake ones is even difficult for myself. So fortunately, there are a lot of good aspects to ad blocking. I want to talk about a few of those now. The good thing is that people are learning. Things are very different now than they were a couple of years ago. Apple, I have to credit with, I think, a lot of kind of high-profile changes to their products, which raises awareness because they're such a huge company that mainstream news have to pick up on these things and actually start reading about them and understanding them. And as a result, you can find stories on the BBC and CNN and MSNBC, etc., about trackers and ad blocking. And an interesting change is not just the fact that the articles are there now, it's the language that's being used in them. So rather than explain from basic principles what ad blockers and tracking blockers are, it is more a kind of commonplace thing for them to just explain how an ad blocker or tracker blocker has had an impact or been taken over or something like that. So it's kind of assuming a certain level of knowledge of the people reading, which is great. Yeah, so as a result, you don't get blank faces when you say ad blocker. I think most of my career, my block list has been a bit of a mystery to my mum, but even she knows what it is related to now. I don't think she quite understands what I do exactly because I maintain a block list rather than an ad blocking extension, but she kind of gets it, which is sort of fantastic. I know it took 23 years, which is, an achievement, I guess. Another great thing is that they are getting more accessible. The previous talk was fascinating, and for me, in this context, by accessible, I mean accessible to the common user. So forgive me if I'm misusing that word here. But there's a lot of good options out there. I know I was talking about all the fake browser extensions recently, but compared to 10 years ago, where there were a lot of not so good options, or actually only a few not so good options, now it's very different. There's obviously browser extensions, which everybody's going to be familiar with. But there's other things like local DNS, like Pi-hole, which is a great way of protecting your whole home, including telemetry coming from things like your smart fridge and smart sprinklers, which I just found out about recently. And there's a ton of other methods. My list is available to download in 33 different formats, and I really should add some more. And it just kind of shows that it's making it more and more accessible to people in general. So it makes it easier for people to find a way of blocking ads that suits them. There's also cloud DNS, which I've learned a lot more about in the last year. Even corporate environments now are starting to care about ad blocking. I think this is a lot to do with privacy implications and saving bandwidth, but it's still coming up more and more often. And companies like DNS Filter are able to offer a pretty good solution to protect an entire company, which is fantastic. So it's pretty much all levels of life at the moment. We're getting ways and options to implement some kind of ad blocking. I wanted to say for DNS Filter, I'm very proud to be working at a place where I really believe in the product. It's an excellent product. It's got a lot of, the content filtering is the primary thing, but it's got some features which I never really thought about, like user management, roaming clients, the mobile app, great reporting, decent price, and threat protection. I've got to plug them because I really do feel that it's a good option for companies at the moment. It's as a result of all the options, it's getting much easier as well. You can just, as an end user, install an ad blocker and go, as long as it's legit, of course. And as I mentioned before, you can just install Pi-hole and protect your whole home, which is fantastic because there's a lot of stuff that goes on that people don't realize is happening. And Pi-hole can kind of reveal things like that to you once you start looking at the logs of all the devices on your network, which are trying to contact various different servers. And you could do things like set up DNS filter and protect all your employees at once. It's pretty flexible as well. You can configure different policies, and obviously there's other products out there. But I do have to say that the threat protection is excellent because, of course, that's what I deal with. All right, well, thanks for having me. I've been Peter Lowe. You can contact me here if you like. And yeah, stay in touch.
Great. Thanks for the informative talk. That was really great. And also, there's a lot of questions from the audience, which is always great. And we do have some time for this, so let's just jump into it. The first question that we have is from Torsten Kleins. Which Google court case were you referring to?
This is the right to be forgotten court case, which was filed, I think, in Ireland. And it's basically where Google claimed that their ad network wasn't tracking people, but some people did some research and found out that the IDs were being shared amongst other ad networks and ad companies for the purpose of real-time bidding. So people could bid on ad placements and stuff like that. And they were able to show that these IDs weren't being anonymized at all. So yeah, I mean, if you just Google Ireland's court case, I think there's some stuff out there.
Okay. The next question that we have is from Zubair. In your experience, have you observed an increasing trend that ads are also served from like these dual purpose hosts that serve both ads as well as actual content? And also, is there a way to address this issue at the DNS level at all?
Yes. Well, to be honest, there's always been a mix. So most of the smaller websites often serve ads from their site along with legitimate content, or not legitimate, but other content as well. And I don't think it's really changed one way or the other lately. I think I wouldn't say that it's gone one way or the other. There's always been bigger ad networks, and that the reason that so my list is just for domains. I don't do any of the kind of sub URL filtering, and it's mostly because I'm quite lazy. Yeah, so I've always seen a mix of both. For the second part of his question, is there a way to address this at the DNS level? Yeah, there is, and it's just by adding it, using something like DNS filter or Pi-hole, or having your own local DNS, which you've configured to black hole domains. So that's what my list has always been for, really. I hope that answers the question.
I hope so. Some next questions are from some David Oakley. Do you have any data on the rate of false positives that you mentioned as a problem?
I'm afraid I don't really. I mean, I can speak from my own experience maintaining my own block list. The biggest issue I have is domains that I've added 15 years ago and have been taken over by someone else. It happens, on not that often, but on a regular basis. I'll get emailed by someone who says, "Hey, you're blocking our site. Why is that?" And I'll check when it was added, and it's 2013 or something, or 2003 or something. But as a job, as a security researcher at DNS Filter, I also look after false positive reports from our customers. So it's a much bigger user base, and it's covering threats as well. So on that side of things, I can say that we, on a regular basis as well, we get domains which, often they were like compromised or something like that, or taken over, and then now it's being cleaned up. So as to actual data, no, I don't. I don't really pay attention to the logs on my server. I have a hit count, and it's interesting to see, variations on traffic, but I'm not too interested in checking into exactly what people are doing. So
there's also another question by David, which is, why can you not block with DNS blocking that filter list can block? I suppose it was basically about, okay, are there things that can be blocked or should be blocked by filter list that may not make sense with DNS?
Yeah, absolutely. DNS filtering is, or host files, or however you want to do it, but domain blocking, it's an excellent kind of good layer. You can effectively block whole domains. So if you block DoubleClick.net, there's thousands of domains, subdomains there, which you will automatically block. But yeah, there's definitely going to be content that you won't be able to block using this method. And you would need something else like a proxy or a browser extension or something like that, that would let you be more fine-grained and do things based on, CSS IDs or URL paths or things like that.
Okay, another question, this is from Dan Rua. How do you decide whether to add a filter to your list? Are you doing your own testing against some tracker definition, or just adding requests as they come?
Yes. So I definitely research every domain that is submitted to me. I also I use uBlock Origin myself, and when I go to a site and I see some ads on it, I'll check to see why that domain is still being, those ads are still being displayed. Also, I'll I look at the network request list and see what, I'm quite interested in that side of things. So I like to know what's happening between my browser and the server and whatever servers. So yeah, if I get submitted a domain or a list of domains, I will research, because I don't like the idea of false positives. I hate the idea of missing out on some content because I'm accidentally blocking something that's legit. So I'll make sure, I'll do my best at least. I don't get it right every single time. But I investigate all the false positive reports as well. I get so. As to how I decide what goes on the list, I do have a policy. In the end, it is very much my list. Originally it was just something I used for myself, and I stuck it on the web, and other people found it useful, and it hasn't really changed since then. So it's been okay, and there haven't been too many issues. But it would be nice to have a kind of more formal definition of tracker or ad server or something like that. It's also getting a lot more complicated lately, because most servers seem to be dual purpose, tracking and serving ads, or at least there's a lot of crossover. So it's a bit subjective in the end, but if you have any issues, let me know, and I'm happy to discuss, because I've got a lot of conversations going on with different people. So
okay, this is a question from my side. I was curious, what has been the effect of the whole COVID situation in terms of like the traffic received by the block list? Has it gone up or down dramatically? Have you seen any effect of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I was discussing this on Twitter the other day. Occasionally I'll post screenshots. I've got some very basic kind of hit count graphs. And I posted a couple of screenshots of kind of the effect of COVID on traffic to my list. Previously, in like January, I was getting between 3.5 to 6 million downloads a day of my list. Now I'm getting between 6.5 to 9 million. And looking at the traffic, there was a definite bump around March, where it went up to sort of 4 to 6, and then 5 to, it kept on rising. It's remarkably regular, though. I think there's a lot of tools out there who have specific days that they download the list from, because if you look at I can share these later on if anybody's interested. If you look at the traffic, each day has a particular peaks and troughs. So, but yes, the pandemic has had a significant increase. I don't know exactly why that is. I guess because more people are online these days and more people are at home. But I think in general, the overall trend is still pretty steady. If you look at it over a kind of year-on-year basis, it's just roughly a straight line. I mean, there's a little bump with the pandemic, but overall, that's what I was talking about before, where it's becoming more and more into the public consciousness now, where people just know what an ad blocker is. Rather than it being a kind of mysterious techie thing that your son does.
Yes, and with this, I think we've answered all the questions for now. I would like to thank you once again, Peter, for spending your time and giving your thoughts. And yeah, we're gonna come back in 2 minutes with our next talk.
Great.
So thanks.
Cheers, everyone.